Okay, get ready because we're going to be diving into some really crazy stuff today. We're talking brain-to-brain communication.
Yeah, it's not just sci-fi anymore. It's actual
Right.
science.
I mean, we're talking real research happening right now.
It's a huge step forward.
Hmm.
We're really going beyond the way we usually communicate,
Mm.
like talking and texting, and we're looking at like direct interaction between minds
Yeah.
using what are they called? Brain-to-brain interfaces?
BBIs.
BBIs. Right.
And we're going to be going deep into one specific BBI called BrainNet.
Oh yeah, BrainNet,
Mm.
developed at the University of Washington. And get this system actually allows three people to work together mentally on a task.
Which has never been done before.
Totally new territory.
Yeah.
It's really blowing the lid off what we thought we knew about how our brains work, especially when we're collaborating.
And our source for this deep dive is a research paper that goes into all the nitty-gritty of BrainNet, how they developed it, how they tested it.
Yeah. And it gets pretty philosophical too.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what does it even mean to have like a social network of brains all linked up?
Deep stuff. So how does this thing actually work? Break it down for us.
Okay, so picture this. You've got three people hooked up to this BrainNet system.
Okay.
Two of them are the senders, and they can see everything that's going on in this task.
Okay.
The third person, that's the receiver, and they're totally in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
They're only getting information from the sender's brains. No other way.
So like a super high-tech game of telephone.
Yeah.
But with brainwaves instead of words.
Exactly.
I like it. So what kind of task are they all working on together?
They use the game kind of like Tetris. The receiver has to decide whether or not to rotate a block. The thing is, they can't see the space it has to fit into, so they have to rely completely on instructions from the senders.
Whoa. So the senders see the whole game, and they have to get the rotate or don't rotate message to the receiver using just their brains.
Yep. And they use EEG, that's electroencephalography, to read the brain activity from the senders.
EEG. Got it.
So when a sender wants to say rotate, they focus on a light that's flashing at a specific frequency. And this creates a special pattern in their brainwaves. The system can pick that up.
Interesting. So the EEG reads the sender's intention, but how does that actually get transmitted to the receiver?
Okay, so this is where TMS comes in. That's transcranial magnetic stimulation.
TMS. Another acronym.
I know, right? But TMS basically uses magnetic pulses to stimulate parts of the brain.
Okay.
So in this case, they're targeting the visual cortex of the receiver.
Ah, so they're not sending like words or pictures, they're sending magnetic pulses directly to the brain.
Exactly. And by changing the intensity of the pulse, they can make the receiver see a flash of light. It's called a phosphene. If they see the phosphene, that means rotate. No phosphene means don't rotate.
Wow, so the receiver's literally getting these brain signals?
Yep.
But it's still their brain that decides to rotate the block or not.
That's important to remember. The system isn't controlling them, it's just giving them information.
Right. So how did they make sure that the information was really being transferred between brains and not just like random luck?
Well, they did two things. They measured how accurate the receiver's decisions were,
Makes sense.
and they also measured something called mutual information.
Mutual
It's a
incremental.
way to measure how much knowing the output of one brain tells you about what's happening in another brain.
Got it. So if there's a lot of mutual information, that means what the senders are thinking is strongly connected to what the receiver does.
Exactly.
Cool.
And they found a significant amount of mutual information, especially when the receiver was making the right choices. So they really showed that there was real communication happening between the brains.
Okay, so they've got three brains linked up, information is flowing, but they didn't stop there, did they?
Oh no, they had to make it even more interesting. They added what they called a bad sender to the mix.
A bad sender. What do you mean?
One of the senders was intentionally giving the wrong advice most of the time.
Ooh, tricky. Like they're throwing a wrench into the whole system.
Exactly. They wanted to see how the receiver's brain would handle getting conflicting information coming from two different brains.
That's a pretty good simulation of real life, you know? I mean, we're always trying to figure out who to trust and who's giving us bad info.
Absolutely. And the results of this bad sender twist were pretty surprising. We'll get into that after the break.
So before the break, we were talking about how the BrainNet researchers threw a curveball into the experiment with this bad sender. It's like they were saying, okay, let's see how the receiver's brain handles being lied to.
It really gets to the core of how we deal with information in the real world, doesn't it?
Right. Like, how do we filter out the noise and figure out what's true?
Exactly. I mean, think about it. Every day we're bombarded with news, opinions, ads, It's like an information overload.
Total information overload, and it's not always easy to know who to trust.
And what's fascinating about the BrainNet study is that they recreated this kind of real-world dilemma in a lab setting, except the information was going directly into the brain.
So the receiver, they had no clue which sender was feeding them bad info, but their brain could still tell something was off.
It really seems that way. The results show that the receiver was way more accurate when they followed the advice of the reliable sender. And over time, they seemed to learn, like they were figuring out who to trust, even though those signals were going straight into their brain.
Wow, so that raises the question, how much of this is happening consciously and how much is unconscious?
That's the million-dollar question. Researchers are still trying to unravel that, but we do know that the brain is like a master pattern recognizer. It's really good at making predictions based on what's happened before.
So maybe the receiver's brain was picking up on subtle differences in the signals from each sender, kind of like, okay, this pattern usually means the right answer, but this one usually means trouble.
That's a very plausible explanation. It could be that even when information is delivered in a completely new way, our brains are still relying on those same basic principles of pattern recognition and prediction.
So this bad sender thing, it has some pretty big implications for the future of BBIs, don't you think?
Absolutely. If we're going to start connecting our minds directly, we have to be aware of the potential for misinformation and manipulation.
Right, because if our brains are so good at recognizing patterns, couldn't that also lead to bias?
Exactly. Like, what if we unconsciously start to favor information that confirms our existing beliefs, even if it's not true? It's something to really think about.
It really is. This whole study makes you realize just how complex communication is, even at its most basic level.
Right. We're not just exchanging words or data. We're constantly evaluating, interpreting, filtering information, and all those things are influenced by so many factors.
So much going on beneath the surface.
And this complexity, it just gets amplified when we go beyond simple yes or no communication. I mean, the BrainNet study was a huge breakthrough, but we're still a long way from being able to share complex thoughts and emotions and experiences in a way that's nuanced and accurate.
So where do we go from here? What are the next steps in developing these more sophisticated BBIs?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is scaling up the technology.
What do you mean?
Well, the BrainNet study only had 3 people. If we want to create truly interconnected networks of minds, we need to be able to connect way more people safely and reliably.
Yeah, that sounds pretty complicated.
It's not just the technical stuff like how to transmit signals. It's also about managing the flow of information in the network and making sure everyone can understand what's being shared.
It's almost like designing a whole new kind of social network, but one that's based on brain activity.
Exactly. And like any social network, there's the potential for misuse, for people creating echo chambers, for spreading misinformation.
Yeah, the ethical considerations are huge.
Absolutely. We need to have ethicists, social scientists, policymakers, everybody involved in the development of this technology from the very beginning.
Because it's not a matter of if this technology will change our lives, it's when.
Exactly. It's coming, and we need to be prepared.
This whole conversation has been so fascinating. It's mind-blowing to think that we might be on the verge of a whole new era of human connection.
It really is. But it comes with a whole new set of questions and challenges that we need to be thinking about now.
Well, on that note, why don't we explore some of those specific challenges in more detail?
Sounds good.
We'll be right back after a short break.
So we've talked about the challenges, we've talked about the ethics, but now I want to talk about the potential. Like, where could BBIs actually be used in the real world?
Well, one area that's really exciting is medicine. Imagine doctors using BBIs to diagnose and treat neurological disorders like we've never been able to before.
So we're talking like personalized medicine on a whole new level. Exactly. For example, researchers are already looking at using BBIs to help patients who are paralyzed regain control of their limbs.
Oh, really?
Yeah, by figuring out the brain signals that control movement, BBIs could actually bypass damaged nerves and directly stimulate muscles, allowing those patients to move again.
That's incredible, like something straight out of science fiction. But it's not just about restoring function, right? Could BBIs also be used to enhance our abilities?
Ooh, that's a great question, and one that definitely brings up some ethical dilemmas. But in theory, Yes, BDIs could potentially be used to enhance things like memory or even boost creativity.
It's mind-blowing to think about what the limits of human potential might be if we could directly interact with our brains like that.
I know, it's both exhilarating and a little bit scary, right?
Definitely. And it's not just about individual potential either. We have to think about how this will affect society as a whole, our relationships, the way we communicate, even our sense of self.
Exactly. Like if we can share our thoughts and feelings directly with others, what does that mean for privacy? How do we set boundaries between our own minds and other people's minds?
It's like we're stepping into a whole new era of human connection, but one that's full of uncharted territory.
And I think that's the key takeaway here. This technology is incredibly powerful, but it's up to us to decide how we're going to use it. Are we going to use it to create a world where people are more understanding and connected, or will it be used to control and manipulate others?
Those are big questions, and I don't think anyone has the answers yet. But one thing's for sure, this research is really making us think about what it means to be human in a world where the lines between our minds are becoming blurred.
Absolutely. It's a journey of exploration and discovery, and it's one that I think will lead us to a much deeper understanding of ourselves.
I couldn't agree more. Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about today. It's been an amazing deep dive into the world of brain-to-brain communication, and I have a feeling this is just the beginning of a much bigger conversation about the future of human connection.
It definitely is. It's a conversation that we all need to be a part of.
That's right. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey, and until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those brains buzzing.